All right, my name is Jacob Boker. I'm the host of In the Stigma, and today we're live with Rebecca Nolting. She's an author from Colorado. She studied at the University of Denver, studied at social work at California State University, and today we're just going to be talking about mental health and how it has affected us personally, and then also just a little bit about her books because I know she came out with a new one recently. I think it's called Building Faith, and then she has another book that's called
Pieces of faith.
Pieces of Faith. That's right. So, Rebecca, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you started to write your books, how you kind of have the heart for mental health or the awareness for mental health, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. My writing journey really started, I knew I wanted to write when I was a teenager and just never felt that right exact timing of it. I tried a few times, but the theme didn't quite come together. It just um, was not the right timing. But about 5 years ago, in 2019, I quit my job and just felt the calling to start writing during my transition time from in between jobs, and started the plan of Pieces of Faith and started that journey, and then started a new job, but unfortunately that distracted me from pursuing the writing. And once COVID hit, things in my job changed a little, and I just felt the calling to pick that back up from some things that were going on at my church. I was writing some devotionals, and I kept getting people to tell me, they kept telling me, I should say, that I was a good writer, and that just, I felt that Holy Spirit saying, you need to finish it.
Mm.
And the good part about writing is you get to say what you want to say, but then it also brings up all the emotions and memories of experiences that were not so good in my life. And but it was also how God was able to show in those moments.
Mm.
So in 2021, then I actually started attending therapy. I was dealing with a lot of things, working through those emotions, and that brought out more things to work on and work through, which became basically a lot of my theme of the second book of Building Faith. That how I navigated that, how I accepted that I was dealing with mental health, how I was working through it. I have a chapter that I wrote about my therapy and how God has brought me through and not left me alone in any of those moments.
Yeah, that's good. I think that writing our books helps us express ourselves. And like you said, it can trigger some things because we have to kind of face the things that we've been through. And I think so many people have a stigma on mental health to where they don't want to admit that they've maybe struggled in their life or maybe admit that they are struggling in their life. But mental health isn't just some crazy person talking on the street. It could be anxiety, depression, stress, loneliness. Even the Surgeon General declared, loneliness an epidemic right now. So that just tells you that enough people must be dealing with it to where it is a problem, it is an issue, and something that we need to talk about because I know we grew up in a time to where, I'm in my 40s, so it's a time to where we don't really talk about mental health. We don't talk about those because it made you look weak. It made you look like there's something wrong with you. It made you seem like you had a problem. But the truth of the matter is, I think everybody from the smartest people and the most strong the strongest people that we know at some point struggle with depression, anxiety, just self-worth or something that we all have to deal with. So I think just writing these books and expressing yourself is awesome just because I think a lot of people don't take the time to self-reflect, and that's what you have to do a lot of times when you're writing a book is you have to actually self-reflect on your own story, which is going to help you write the story. So um, what's your thoughts when you think of mental health and when you think, like, when people say they're struggling with mental health? What's your heart, and then what's your like mindset about that?
So there's to me, a lot of misunderstanding about what mental health is, especially when it comes to, I would say, depression, in the sense that I was still working. I was still doing a lot of my activities. So I was able to cover that up, fairly well because I was still functioning in that sense. They weren't seeing, the weekends where I just literally did nothing. They weren't seeing that because they were seeing me still involved, as I said, working a full time job, being still active in church. And so I was able to cover that up. And I know a lot of people were not understanding like how that went together. They just noticed that I was talking about it to a certain extent, or that I wasn't, as bubbly or like joking around with people, but they weren't sure, what to say or what to do about it. I was, their discomfort was, not helpful to me, but I also didn't know how to educate them because I didn't have all the words to express it at the time, because it
Mm,
is a very overwhelming thing to go through to be able to. I remember one time I was actually at my church and I was telling a friend I was feeling very anxious before the service, and she asked me, what are you anxious about? And I told her I can't tell you. And what I meant was that I just couldn't find the words. Because she responded with, "Well, you don't have to tell me." But what I was trying to say was that I didn't know how to explain it to her, why I was so anxious and what was really truly going on mentally at that moment. I just needed support. I just didn't know what that support even looked like or how to ask for it correctly. That's been a lesson, for me, definitely, as I have feel like I've healed from a lot of the things I've worked through, but I also know that it could hit me at any time again. And that is, you know, something that people don't realize, that like you look better, but you're still having a daily struggle. There's still those moments where you doubt yourself, where the anxiety takes over of, something that's coming up or something that's happened. You replay it in your mind multiple times because how you handled it may not have been the best, or how someone reacted wasn't the best. So for me, it's been a definite learning experience. And then I've been trying to be open with other people, and I have found that as I have been open, other people have been more willing to be open with me,
mm,
and we're able to support one another in that. And I can, one friend that reached out, I'll send her just little funny things about anxiety, and she's like, "Oh, totally understand it." Like, I found my core people in that, which I didn't know I needed,
yeah.
or that I didn't know who that would be, because you think that you have certain people that are going to be there, and there are, but then there's other people I have met along the way that have understood, could relate better, that I had never even met before this
Mm.
whole experience.
Yeah, I feel the
So,
same. I feel sometimes it's easier to relate with a stranger, especially when it comes to mental health, than it does to maybe your loved ones, because, like you were talking about, we don't always know how to express it. So if we don't know how to express it, sometimes we don't even know what it is at the time. Is it me just being tired today? Is it me being off a little bit? Is it just, something I ate last night? I don't really know what it is, but I don't feel right mentally today. And it's hard to explain, especially like during the moment of you actually struggling with it. And it's easier to look back on it. It's not like, if your foot hurts, it's easy to say, "Oh, my foot hurts." And then you could kind of start thinking about like, what happened to my foot? Why does it hurt? Or you know exactly what happened to it. Or if you're sick and have a cold, you could easily say, I'm sick and have a cold. But when it's mental health, it's really hard to identify. One of the reasons is I think not enough people talk about it. And then there's not enough education around it to let you be aware of what it is. You know what the symptoms are when you get a cold. You know what the symptoms are when you have a hurt foot, a hurt leg, even a hurt stomach. And then you could a lot of times trace that back to where that came from. Like, oh, I did a lot of running yesterday, or I sprained my ankle, or I've had a bad knee from a sports injury when I was a kid. When you have a stomach ache, you could trace it back to, I probably ate something bad last night, or I knew I should have not have ate that, or as much of this, or I, did way too much dessert than I should have, and now I'm, paying the price or something. But when it's your mental health, a lot of times it's hard to even identify what is really wrong and what you're feeling, especially in the moment. And somebody could just say something to you and it kind of just triggers something or throws something off from maybe the past. Maybe it triggers something, or maybe it wasn't the response you like wanted or kind of needed or expecting even. And then all of a sudden it just throws you off mentally. Now you feel weird, you feel off, you don't feel right, but you don't really know what it is and you don't know how to identify it. So if you don't know how to identify it, it's really hard to explain it. Like you said, your friend said, "Well, what is it? What are you anxious about?" And you're like, "I don't even know. I'm just anxious. It's like I'm not feeling right. Something's off, but I can't even explain it to you." And that's something that is all right because that's natural. That's how God created us is, he created us with these emotions. But one of the things we want to try to identify in this show is just talking about mental health more. So when these things come up, we can start identifying them. Because if you talk about it and I talk about it and we talk about it and more people talk about it, then it's going to be easier to identify. It's going to be like, you know what? That wasn't the response that I wanted from that person or expected from them, and it just threw me off a little bit. It's nothing wrong with that. It's just like if you were running and you tripped or stepped on your ankle wrong and you twisted your ankle or you hurt your ankle a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean you don't know how to walk. That doesn't mean that you don't know how to run. That doesn't mean that you're just clumsy. Like there could have been a pothole there. There could have been something. That's a lot of times what it is. It's a pothole for our mental state when something happens, and we just have to be able to identify it. So definitely thank you for sharing that. So what have been like some of the major struggles that you've dealt with in mental health in your life that you're willing to share? I mean, like some things we don't want to go and re open that door or talk about it, but I think just like you said, the more you're able to share, the more people identified, the more it helped people. And I know you shared that one time at church. Is there anything else that like is pretty? I think all mental health is pretty common, and that everybody struggles with it in a different way. So, is there anything else that comes to mind when you start thinking about mental health or something that you've experienced personally?
Well, when you're asking that, I remember one time in my therapy session that I mentioned to her that I'm sure everybody has felt, like you had mentioned, like the loneliness, the rejection, abandonment. My therapist agreed. And then I find myself really trying to minimize like my experience sometimes now that I'm looking back at it. And I have to correct myself with that because there was a time in 2022 that I felt like I had no one, even though I knew I had people. And there were two incidences where I was developing a plan for suicide.
Oh,
And the first time was um, nothing, I mean, not that either time anything happened out of it, but the first time it lasted only a few hours and I was able to just literally lay in my bed and basically feel like looking back, God was just holding me down saying, "You're not doing it," just being there. The second time, I just couldn't stop thinking about dying and being just being done, and made the decision after a very restless night trying to pray. And it wasn't every time I'd pray it'd be fine, but then got up in the morning and was like, something's still not right. Just could not stop thinking about various things. So I did drive myself to our local hospital and was admitted for 5 days in a mental health facility for safety. And that was one of, I think, the most terrifying thing I've ever done, for the fact that, like I said, that I know people have felt alone, but I also knew I needed to do it to show myself that I loved myself.
mm,
And that was the most terrifying thing I've ever done, is to walk in the hospital and say openly, "I need help. This is what's going in my head." And I remember telling my pastor a few months before that that was one of the scariest thoughts that I had, was to do that, for the fact that they want to ask you it over and over and over again. And yes, they do. They ask you. Every single professional walked up to me and was like, "So, what was your plan?" and blah, blah, blah. Like, It was a lot, but truthfully, when I finally knew I was going to be going somewhere, got through the psych eval, the thoughts did stop, which I was very thankful for. I was very anxious waiting, but once I was like, no, I was going somewhere, the thoughts did stop. And I was able to reset and, as I said, show myself that I was cared enough about myself to seek that help. And I know that is something that I knew I didn't ever want to be alone. And it was to some of the loneliest days in that sense while I was there,
Mhm.
for the fact that I didn't have my phone. I didn't have the ability to reach out to people. I could call my husband, and that was it for just a few minutes a day. And I didn't have my comforts, but I also was able to just have those days of safety and just, like I said, reset my mind. Even though, getting out, then it was anxious about, then I had to tell people that I was there and have difficult conversations when I was ready. I've not really had a whole lot of conversations like I am now. It was actually when I started really writing about my mental health in the second book, and I honestly didn't know that I was going to say what I was going to say in that chapter. I literally was typing it and going, "Okay, God, you're making me go this way. You're taking me there." And
Mm.
I feel like I was able to describe it the best I could. There's details I left out for I'm not going to share with anyone.
Yeah.
That was just between me and God of what the exact plan was and those details, for the fact that I don't feel like that's was necessary for people to understand, or to them just have chosen not to share.
Yeah, definitely. Some things are just for you and God. I mean, it's not, some people can't understand it or wouldn't understand it. So I definitely get that. So I know you were saying, Rebecca, that you're in the hospital and then there's some guilt, shame, and then there's also some forgiveness. And I just want to talk about that part a little bit, make sure that we address that because I think that's a big thing for all of us that struggle with mental health is the guilt and the shame, and then also the forgiveness that has to come with it. Because I know for me, sometimes I feel that guilt and shame, then I kind of get easily offended, and there definitely has to be some forgiveness. But I don't know exactly what it was on your end, but could you share that a little bit with us?
Sure. So a lot of the guilt and shame was the thoughts that I was having and the plans that I was making, that I felt like God didn't love me, that there's no way that God would forgive me for those thoughts because they were just so bad.
Hmm.
And what I had to learn was that God did forgive me. I had a moment where I finally felt like God forgave me, but it also then had to go into forgiving myself. And
Mm.
that feels like an ongoing process, that I know God forgave me, but we also have to be able to know that we need to forgive ourselves. That is also a very important piece of it, that is, like I said, an ongoing process. It's not something that it's a one and done. And then when you start having those thoughts again, that it's it's easy to start beating yourself up again about it, and to feel like you didn't forgive, we really weren't forgiven. You start having those doubts,
Mm.
and not true, that you were forgiven and that you have to go through that process again. And sometimes it takes another, when you're struggling again, that to remind yourself, no, God forgave me for those. God will forgive me. God is with me. And I need to remember that, I'm not thinking clearly. Those thoughts were when I was not okay. And I need to just keep breathing. I just actually told a friend that the other day, that when she asked me, how do I get through these difficult moments? And my answer was that God is with you, even though you may not feel it. God is, right there. Seek Him as best you can, and to just keep breathing. That
Yeah.
is, you can get through a lot with just taking it one I sometimes tell people I'm taking it 1 hour at a time. During those difficult moments, I was saying 1 minute at a time because you just have to like let it go, and it's hard to be patient with that because it can feel like it's never going to end.
Mm,
And fortunately, if you can just trust God and keep seeking Him, keep praying, keep trying to read scripture, or you can just keep, like I said, the friend just reached out to me and she was grateful that I responded the way I did, because that, I'm sure, was a comfort to her to know that I've been there. People may not fully understand the how close I was to the edge. They may not understand that full experience, but I know, like I said earlier, about forms of abandonment or feeling alone in something, that we can connect over that. And you may not understand having an anxiety attack or having just thoughts where you just feel like and I said, it's just not going to end, but God is with you at all times.
yeah, he is. I know it's sometimes hard because when you're going through mental challenges, it's easy to feel that God isn't with you and God maybe doesn't care, but that's not the truth. It's just we're going through a hard time, and it's we feel. I was reading a post of yours on social media, and it's from the Mindful Christianity, and it says having anxiety and depression is like being scared and tired at the same time. It's a fear of failure, but no urge to be productive. It's wanting a friend but hating socializing. It's wanting to be alone but not wanting to be lonely. It's caring about everything then caring about nothing. It's feeling everything at once then feeling uh, paralyzing nothing. So I was just reading that and kind of, described a lot of what I think mental health and anxiety and depression and those feelings that we can have are. We don't want to be lonely, but we want to be alone, and, all these other things. And it's just like, I think that was a good post to kind of describe and help people understand it a little bit because, you may feel alone. And I know there's Exodus 23:30, like you said, you got to take just one breath at a time, one step at a time, whatever it is. And Exodus 23:30 says, "Little by little, take possession of the land." And that was, you know, after they had crossed the Red Sea and they're going into the Promised Land. And it's like, that's in Exodus, so it's like little by little. And a lot of times we just want to take these big steps, these huge steps, but even God's saying, little by little, take possession of the land. And sometimes we go off in our thoughts or our just our thinking or whatever that kind of makes us struggle some. So it's like it's maybe not be physical land, but it's our mind, it's our mindset, it's our thoughts, it's our thinking, and it's just little by little till we could take possession of the land. So I think that's a good advice because, sometimes us as people, we want to just give the solutions to people. It's like, oh, it's probably this, or it's probably that, it's probably this, or you could just do these things. And it's like, you know what? Take one step, take one breath, just take it one day at a time, or one step at a time, or 1 minute at a time. And like you said, reach out to somebody who cares, or try to listen to some Bible verses, or read, or listen to a sermon or something, and try to change your mindset of and the thought pattern what's going on. Because what you have to do is, if your mind's thinking a certain way, like I'm not feeling good, I want to hurt myself or do something like that, we have to try to change the way that we're thinking. Because if not, like you said, once you knew that you were going to go somewhere and get some help, it kind of helped change that for you some. And that's what we have to try to get in the habit of is, if you hurt your foot, let's go back to that again. You're going to take it easy on your foot, and you're just going to take it one small step at a time, or maybe not even a step at a time, and just let it heal for a little bit. And maybe have to reach out to somebody to help you walk or do something else. But when it comes to our mental aspect, we don't do the same thing, which it's the same exact thing. You can't like break your leg and go run the next day. It actually takes a little bit of time. It takes some physical therapy. It takes some, rebuilding and getting stronger. And that's what we need to do is rebuild and get stronger with our thoughts and with our mind and everything too. So um, we are getting close to the end, but I do want to just share with people how to get your book, both your books, where the best place is to get those. If it's Amazon, a website, anything that you have pieces of faith and building your faith, which I think all go hand in hand. And I think, you know, maybe they weren't ran directly for mental health, but I think it has a lot to do with people's mental health and mental state and just kind of understanding, you know, your faith is a big part of that, whatever your belief system is. And, you know, whatever that is, it's like if you believe you can, you can. If you believe you can't, you can't. If you believe that, you know, um, whatever. So just building, you know, building those pieces of faith and then also the building of faith. So, can you share with us where to get those books and find out more information about you or how to connect with you?
Yeah, so right. So I do have my books on Amazon. The best way to look up my books on Amazon is to type in my name, because if you type in Building Faith, there's a lot of books about it, which is no problem. But so you can just look up my name. They are actually also available through Barnes and Noble and a bunch of other small real retailers. I do have a website called Extraordinary from Ordinary.com.